Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Back to comics on today's episode. First, a quick note. Sorry, I'm adjusting my archive and making things accessible at another platform, and in doing so, there was a little technical glitch, and a bunch of my episodes repeated. So you might have seen in your podcast feed, hey, Word Balloon has 300 new episodes. No. They're copies of existing episodes. My apologies for that. The techies are working on it and trying to fix the problem. But if it caused any overload in your cache, my apologies. But things will be rectified moving forward. Today's episode, really fun conversation with my dear friend Vaneta Rogers of Newsarama. They, of course, have been around for a long time, and back in the pre-2010 years, I spent a couple of years putting Word Balloon there. I always like to say I don't work for Newsarama, I work with Newsarama, because I kind of was like this independent guy that got to put my podcast there. But I really enjoyed the time that I did that, in particular working with two people. Mike Dorn was always great, and he's still there, and a really fair guy, but he was always back at home, so I really had a chance to work face-to-face with him and deal with him on a day-to-day basis. The people I dealt with mostly were Matt Brady and Vaneta Rogers. And Matt, because Matt was, kind of the daily editor, and we would go over things. And then also Vaneta, I would end up seeing at conventions, and Matt would also be at shows. And a lot of times, Matt was the point person there at the convention. We'd get our assignments from him in terms of, bird dogging for interviews on the floor, whether just for my Word Balloon podcast or also to help with the video that was being shot at shows, especially New York Comic Con in particular. But there was a really long period where Matt, Vaneta, and I were all together, or Vaneta and I were also in the field because we're both from the Midwest, and we would see each other at a lot of the Midwest shows. And it just became this nice little rhythm, and it was great to kind of, as we say at the end of the conversation, we kind of kept each other sane, all three of us. And, Vaneta's just become a really great colleague, and I've always respected her work. I think she does a tremendous job covering the industry. The last few years, she's been looking directly at the direct market and talking to shop owners about what's working, what isn't. And it was a turbulent year from about a year ago, the end of 2016, and the beginning of 2017. She did a lot of Q&As with retailers. And as we close in on the final quarter, it's interesting to kind of look back and see, what's been going on this year with the big two. But as Vaneta points out, a lot of what, my frustrations are from a business standpoint with a DC or a Marvel, other companies do it. They might do it on a smaller scale. So, and I have to point out, by the way, that a lot of this was recorded, the entire conversation was recorded before Marvel Legacy really kicked in. And also, as we get closer to the Watchmen DC Universe event, the Doomsday Clock. And I have to say, from a creative standpoint, I do like a lot of what the Big Two has been serving up lately. I really like Marvel Legacy. I thought Jason Aaron did a great job as far as the introduction issue. My conversations with people like Chip Zdarsky and Greg Pak and others, both on Word Balloon and also just at conventions, I kind of like what I'm hearing in terms of a lot of the directions for what the Marvel books are doing. And yeah, I can't deny I'm kind of really intrigued by the Doomsday Clock at DC and everything leading up to it and what's been going on with Rebirth. And they seem to be entering a second stage of their reboot of the DC universe. So, and also we get into not only what's happening in the comics, but also I wanted to know what she thought of the latest movie output, I should say, the more recent TV output, and what she's watching and what she thinks. And then also, because you can't deny it, it's there, these culture wars that are, all over society, they've invaded the geek culture as well. And I kind of wanted to know what Vaneta's thoughts were on some of these issues as well. And she's kind of reluctant to do it because I think she likes to just go out and do her reporting and say, this is what I've learned, and not get her own opinions involved. But I think, I'm glad she was willing to share her views. Because, again, I think she's an observer of the market, and the market is bigger than just what we're getting in the comics. So it was a pleasure to pick the brain of Vaneta Rogers and have this nice lengthy conversation that I'm sure we're all talking about in the stores and among friends and maybe when you're gaming, who the hell knows. But really happy to welcome Vaneta Rogers on today's Word Balloon. It's brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your support. We're closing in on the end of October, and I've got several new patrons via Patreon that make up the League of Word Balloon listeners. And thank you very much, because it really does help me out to get to conventions, to continue to upgrade equipment, and keep things running here on the podcast. Word Balloon is free. It will always be free, but if you want to help the cause, you can go to wordballoon.com, click on the Patreon ad, or go to patreon.com/wordballoon. And, like I always say, is Word Balloon, do you think it's worth the price of a comic book? I hope I bring you as much entertainment as the comic books we read each month and each week. I'm trying. And I think, luckily, the guests have complied, and we've had some really great shows this year. So thank you very much for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by In Stock Trades at InStockTrades.com. There's some cool books out there right now. Among them, the Grayson Super Spy Omnibus. What a tremendous series from Mikkel Janin, Tom King, and Tim Seeley. This collects it all. It even includes the Grayson Future's End issue and Robin War 1 and 2, Nightwing Rebirth. So, you kind of get an end to Dick's time as a spy for Spiral and back into the DC universe properly and stuff. But that was a really fun turn for Dick Grayson, and I think one of the real surprises of the DCU period. It certainly lasted 20 issues, and again, was very, very popular. This omnibus is 50% off. It's just $49.99. They've re-put out another DC book from Alan Davis, who wrote and drew it. Mark Farmer did the inking. The Nail, a great Elseworld story from the Justice League. This collects both the original series and also the sequel, Another Nail. And it's pretty cool. All in one big collection for the first time. 320 pages, 50% off. It's $19.99. Good to see that Volume 3 of I Hate Fairyland is out. Good girl. That's Scotty Young at his best. At his dirtiest and most diabolical. It collects issues 11 through 15. And it's 42% off. It's $9.85 at In Stock Trades. There is also, let's see, I want to get some more indie stuff in here. Well, there certainly is Mr. Higgins Comes Home, the hardcover. Good steampunk adventure from the mind of Mike Mignola and beautiful art from Warwick Johnson. 45% off, $8.24. Just a few of the great things available now at InStockTrades.com. Check it out for yourself. Great books at great prices. If your orders are $50 or more, you will receive free shipping from InStockTrades.com. All right, without further ado, let's pick up our conversation with Vaneta Rogers of Newsarama. And I say Rama just to kind of upset poor Matt Brady. It's Rama, like drama, not Rama, like Bananarama. Yeah, whatever. I say Rama. Deal with it. Vaneta Rogers, great conversation with Vaneta about the comics market and really the geek culture in general, now on Word Balloon. I am thrilled to welcome back my friend, Vaneta Rogers, and it's been literally at least 5 or 6 years since you've been on Word Balloon, and that's embarrassing in itself.
Is it? Has it?
I'm afraid to look at the list of programs to actually see how many years it's been since we've talked on the air. But I'm glad to have you back, so welcome back.
Thank God it's not video, because people go, that's her? She's aged so much.
Shut up. Not at all. So, and it's, we miss you on the convention circuit, but, you're a mom and you got a kid that was at activity age, and I can't believe the kid's already in college, you were telling me off the record.
I'm officially an empty nester, although she comes back on the weekends a lot, so I don't know how official it is.
That's cool. That's all right. So, but I've really appreciated what you've been writing about in terms of the industry and also specifically the direct market. You've done a series of articles this year in particular to ask a lot of basic questions that I think readers are asking. And certainly retailers. And it's funny, as we're recording, I just got off the phone with Dirk Wood. And the one point that I always want to remind everybody is the real customers of the publishers are the retailers. Because literally all us consumers that rely on being Wednesday warriors, we are at the mercy, the purview, the whims of the retailer and what they choose to stock in their store. And yes, we could go that extra step, and they're very happy to pre-order something. But, that's like, vote early, or, make sure you do your taxes well before April 15th and the like, in terms of, comics sometimes are that thing of, no, I'm walking in the store and I want to buy what's there now. So. Well,
it's even more true now because, one of the things that I actually had some things pointed out to me. I did a retailing story, I don't know, I think it was in December or something, and somebody completely off the record, that I won't say who it is, but they're pretty high up in the industry, called me and said, I read your stuff, but you didn't even mention that how many titles are coming from some of these publishers and how many titles they're trying to sell, even though sales are down from where they were, right? So when you talk about the retailers choosing what they have on the shelves, that's even more important now, where a lot of retailers feel like there are a lot more titles to choose than they could possibly stock on their shelves. So they're going to be even more choosy out of these slew of different titles being offered, not just by the superhero publishers, but also even by the independent. There's so many things coming out, so they completely are the customers. That's who's got to decide how many issues of this and that and the other thing that they're going to stock on the shelf.
And not only the obvious, like, do I like this book, but then we get into the gimmicks that each of the big publishers will sometimes lay out, and certainly. For Marvel, these lenticular covers, and, the shorthand of the story is that you might have to buy 25 issues of, I'm going to, just say Ant-Man 28 to get the hot lenticular cover of a completely different title. And it's like, my store doesn't sell 3 copies of Ant-Man 28. And that's kind of lousy. And I really, that in particular, I find incredibly mean, for a lack of a better word.
Well, and it completely, so these sales numbers that we see are influenced by things like the variant covers, the returnability, those kind of things. So we see these sales numbers come in, and obviously the editorial team, the publishing team, they can pat themselves on the back for these numbers that are coming in. But how many of those 25 comics that are required for, I'll use Ant-Man again, how many of those actually sold, or did they take that lenticular cover and sell it on eBay and make back, what they would have made on, say, 10 of those copies, and they actually only sold 15 of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's, and then for, a company who orders hundreds, they might actually order an extra 100 so they get a few more of those variant covers. So it inflates the numbers unjustly. But from a sales standpoint, so if you're the publisher and you're sitting back and maybe seeing your competition doing that, and so why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you say, well, we need to beat last year's numbers, or we need to make sure that these comics keep selling. So why wouldn't you do it? But then the smaller publishers are saying, well, here's why you wouldn't do it, because of all those extra copies of Ant-Man, this guy doesn't have the budget to buy my comic,
right.
Right. So in a way, you can also argue it's hurting the industry. So it's just a really weird situation we're in right now, where we'd like to think that comic books aren't like they were in the 90s, where people were just collecting them, and that these sales numbers are actually people who are really reading them. But when you drill down into it, there are some things influencing the industry overall that are worth looking at, from not just maybe it's not collectability as much, although the lenticular covers are, I think, but just, manipulating the numbers to tell one story when there's a completely different story under it.
And it seems like, and it's specifically Marvel, because I don't, and again, you primarily cover DC.
DC's got, I think DC has done, they've got some lenticular covers now. I do primarily cover DC, so I can talk to you about the specifics of the storylines at DC. I don't know a lot of, but I watch the whole industry, so I know the stuff in general that's going on at Marvel, the different events they've got going on and what they've got coming up. So I can't talk about the real specifics about the
business
stories, like, no, I can't talk about, like, I don't know, who killed who.
Oh, yeah, no.
Or what's the secret meeting behind the cliffhanger at the end of such and such issue. But I from an industry-wide standpoint, when I did the stories, I did a whole series of stories in January, and there was a lot of attacks on Marvel. And it did look like Marvel was guilty on a higher scale of a lot of the evils, the oversaturation. They still have a lot more. If you look at the number of titles shipping, they're always the highest.
Right.
They're always shipping a whole lot more goods, or offering those, a lot more titles, I should say, offering a lot more titles than other publishers. And, so they seem to be the only one. But really, if you look at it, there's more than just them. And other people are following along with it because they see them doing it. For example, lenticular covers. People see, well, Marvel's being successful because they're doing those things. We got to get out there and do that too, So I don't know. I guess you could say maybe they're being the leader, or they were the leader in some of these things. But now it seems like it's a almost industry-wide problem. Not quite. There's some people that are just saying, that enough is enough.
Well, I guess what I was saying, though, too, was more that it's the business end versus any editorial choices. And again, the added, I know that there are incentives to get lenticular covers, but they just seem more extreme with Marvel, and that it's keyed to them making more money each quarter. And again, that every corporation is like that. But it just seems like, Marvel seems to stunt these things so that the numbers look good at the end of the quarter, and again based on the gimmick versus, God, this is a hot story. Everybody wants to read this thing. We sold out on this amazing story, and they're kind of forcing sales that have very little to do with the product, other than the gimmick end of the product.
Well, if we're going to be honest, if you talk to retailers, and this is honestly them speaking, not me, they really, most retailers, although they love their Marvel comics, and really, most of their sales probably come from Marvel, they do feel like DC is a little more retailer friendly. DC has this returnability that they do, which I think, retailers really appreciate. Mm-hmm. They do have a little bit easier structure for their variant covers, or even, very, compared to Marvel, definitely. Yeah. So I think they do feel like, I know DC, I have not talked to them in a few months about this, but they offer, help with advertising. When they did the big New 52 push, they definitely reached out to retailers about it. I think they continue to do that a lot more. So, I think there's just a feeling among retailers that DC values the direct market a little more than Marvel. But so it's easy to get retailers to say, oh, Marvel's doing all these bad things. But I think, over the whole industry, unfortunately, I think there's a little bit of that with everybody to some extent. I just hate to point right at Marvel and just say it's all their fault.
No, and I agree with you. And honestly,
but they're clearly. If you look at some of the evils, yes, definitely on the oversaturation. If you look at the number of titles and what some of them are, and talk to the retailers, some of these titles, they're like, I used to sell really high numbers of 4 X-Men related titles, and now I'm selling really little numbers of 10, or something like that,
Yeah.
So because for some reason, I don't know, I'm not sure if printing costs have gone back. For a while they were complaining that paper costs were really high. Maybe they make more money if they have more titles. I wouldn't think so, So I'm not sure what their theory is, or maybe as their sales go down, they just think they need to add another title. DC was guilty of it to some extent. Everybody seemed to be trying to hold them to that 52 number, and I think probably that was too many. You know what I mean? Now I think they ship maybe that many, but it's the same title a couple times a month instead. Or, they don't hold fast to it, or maybe they'll add some miniseries or some events or things like that. They don't have to have 52 separate titles. So, maybe they were guilty of a little bit of oversaturation at the time. So,
yes.
So, I think there's a lot of different. I don't know, a lot of different players in the game.
Well, no, and I agree with you. And I was going to say, let's not, I'm not kissing DC's ass, because they, in the failures of the New 52 and DCU, the stuff that came right before Rebirth, they were sucking, and they had to. And frankly, Marvel had the same problem in the early 2000s and had to pull back and get some focus and say, all right, let's remember why these characters are important and why they're good. And likely that may be what's coming with the Marvel Legacy initiative. But yeah, DC did have the same or similar problems and had to pull back because they needed to regain retailer confidence. And truly, maybe Marvel in 2018 is going to have to go through that same thing to a degree, and maybe they already are.
With Legacy, with the whole Legacy initiative. Well, to kind of back up a minute, I think really from a retailing standpoint, one of the things, as opposed to the story elements or respecting the characters and all, or getting back to the core, which is definitely a part of Rebirth. I think that's what they're kind of trying to lean toward with Legacy. But when we talk about the New 52, another thing that it did was it kind of tested the waters for relaunching with a new number one. And not testing the water. They jumped completely into the waters, I should say. And they just relaunched everything with a new number one. And it appeared right away to really work for them. Their sales went way up and people were really interested in comics again. But then what happened is the superhero relaunches just kept happening again. And I think Marvel was guilty of this to quite an extent. Like you would have just constantly, there's a new number one. Now this is, so you, before 2011, you maybe had like volume 5 or volume 6 or something, but now, I mean, all of a sudden you had like volume 10, volume 12,
for real.
Just constantly these new number one. And I heard a lot of retailers really complaining about that.
Well, how do you catalog
they felt
that?
Like
how do you for the consumer?
Yeah, well, not only the cataloging, but from a sales standpoint, they felt like, if somebody starts reading with a new number one, and at the end of number 6, there's going to be a new number one, it's a perfect jumping off point. What New 52, I think, was trying to do was getting a jumping on point. But then the more relaunches you do and the more you do it, it also, you start losing people. So I think that if there's anything that the New 52 did that retailers would point, straight toward, that was the beginning, it would be these constant relaunches that the superhero comics experienced in the 2010s or the early 2010s, and it did. It hurt those comic books. And it also led to this oversaturation because let's put out 2 new number ones because the sales on that one's down. Let's stop it at, issue 12, and then we'll put out 2 new number ones instead of just that one issue. So, or that one title. So yeah, I think relaunches was over time, it became a problem for the industry.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think there was a calendar year where Spider-Gwen, there might've been 3 number ones within a 12-month period. And it does get ridiculous, and you don't know as a consumer which book to start with because, again, like you said, they're all number ones. I like Jeff Loeb's solution, and he's not the only one. And really, Dark Horse does do this with their numbering. It's, let's have Superman Fall of Krypton 1 through 6, and then the next thing be Superman Luthor's Revenge 1 through 5, because it would simplify things, and people would know what story they're buying. And that you get 2 new first issues each year, so they're that kind of, hey, all right, this is a new thing, and here we go. I mean, that just seems like it makes,
keep the numbering up keep the numbering in the top right corner, but then have another number under it, like this.
Exactly.
This storyline, like where we are in this storyline.
Right, because the arbitrary return to original numbering is, okay, whatever. I mean, again, it's like they abandon it and embrace it to their own whims, and again, all it does is confuse customers. And and I think that's an even better solution. You're right, is keeping the legacy numbers going for those completists.
I don't know.
Well, because again, they're all components of the direct market. I mean, that's the thing,
right?
Man, and it's crazy because I forget when you came into comics, but, as someone who came in the 70s and was buying them at the candy shop when I was a little kid, and then to see the direct market, and the direct market was such an amazing innovation in the 80s.
Yeah.
And now it's this, what do we do with this? And how do we, because it's the backbone of the industry and it needs to survive. And I get that.
It is now. And the model, you wonder if, I don't know, if you dropped in and there was nothing existing, would you say, well, the best thing for comic books right now in this day and age is to have standalone stores, which of course retailing in general is not doing well because of online retailing. Right. So is that the best thing for comic books? You probably wouldn't come up with that. But knowing the history of comic books, it did. It saved the comic book industry. It turned the comic book industry into something new, really. And even the literature itself, it matured along with that. It became this whole new medium almost. I mean, it just really changed things. So there was a lot of good that came with it. But now, decades later, you have to wonder if this is the ideal situation. But at the same time, you can't change it, and you can't back away from it because it is the backbone. Like you said, this is where we're so. I mean, I did an article on so. Has digital hurt print? And most of the publishers I talked to said not really. It supports it. We think we're getting new customers. We haven't seen that it hurts print. And all of them said print is still, our number one. I mean, that's where our sales come from. So I think a lot of people maybe 10 years ago would have predicted the complete opposite, that, comic books are going to go all digital. Everything's digital, when those little book readers first started coming out.
Yes.
And the first time they announced the iPad, and people are going to be able to read comics on their tablet. I think, people predicted the demise of the comic book industry, but really print is still the backbone of the industry, even though you can read things digitally.
Well, you're right.
But at the same time, digital sales, are robust. And a lot of publishers said that their digital sales are also important. So I don't know. It'd be easy for us to sit here and say, well, 10 years down the road, will that be even, will they really, that's when we'll start to see print go away. I don't know. A lot of people like to predict that kind of thing.
Yeah, I hope the direct market does survive. And it's funny because I was one of those people, I think, in the late aughts and in the early, 2010, 2011 period, like, hey, if the direct market has to go, shrug, so be it. I hope not. But if stores can't find a way to sustain. Now, though, I am in full, I'm glad that the digital revolution has not killed the direct market. And further, I like the idea that comic stores, good comic stores, can be like, and forgive the haughty comparison, but like salons, but like mini, a destination. Because, man, again, you and I, we're from that record store generation that had music stores, and the retailer was the place that you learned how to define what you like and your tastes in culture. And I think that it's really important to have that kind of destination. And good comic stores still provide that. They have book clubs. They invite creators in for signings. And further, if they can't, physically be there, they'll have a Skype chat with a creator. And I think that building community is a huge value to the store, obviously, to the readers, and to the industry. And it keeps people faithful and engaged and really interested in what's going on. And I wonder now, and it was something we talked about a little bit off the air, about the average reader age. And I think that's really interesting, and some of your research in these articles kind of showed an interesting number.
Well, the retailers said that although they're seeing, more every day, they're seeing more young people, really the core of their customer base is in their 30s, their mid to late 30s, which, I think most of us had suspected for a while that, if you go to comic conventions, people talk about how, half the people there are women, but really most of the men you see are in their 30s.
Yeah.
Not all. And of course, it depends on the comic convention. I think if something's more focused on movies and The Walking Dead and that kind of stuff, you're going to see a completely different crowd than someplace that's truly just about buying comic books and seeing comic book creators. It's a little different crowd. But yeah, it is. It's people say, oh, we should get them back on the spinner racks in grocery stores. Well, if the core of the direct market is, 30 something, it's probably not going to be people who are buying it off the comic book spinner rack. But, do we want to get young people reading comics again? I certainly with the current offering, just not to say that there aren't some great kids comics out there. Obviously there are, and we both have friends who write kids comics. There's some fantastic kids comics. But a lot of what's offered in the direct market and most of the best-selling titles are definitely not for kids.
Agreed, but I also think that through more mainstream publishers, non-comic publishers, the kid comic market is thriving and also selling at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and brick-and-mortar stores.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Book retailers.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
I totally agree. And they're sometimes even in a different format.
Yep, absolutely.
They're more the digest size stuff or actual books. And, but they're still, serial comic book reading. A lot of times there'll be a whole series of books or a series of digest. And obviously it's still word balloons to use the word.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. No, they still on the inside. They still look like comics, and they're definitely comic storytelling and everything. But
right.
But as far as that, that direct market audience and stuff being in their mid-30s, right. I also wonder with the young people that are discovering comics and are coming through. It used to be Sandman, Neil Gaiman's series, but now Saga,
right.
And
right.
Some of the other more creator-owned centric comics that aren't superhero fare. It's funny because I always feel like, and boy, forgive me, listeners, if you find this analogy tiring, but I don't know if Vaneta's heard me say this. To me, DC and Marvel are like Burger King and McDonald's, and it's like, hey man, I came in for a Whopper. Don't try it. I mean, we always had like a special Sandman comic from DC or, the great cosmic stuff that was coming from Marvel, from Epic Illustrated and some of the other things they did in the late 70s and through the 80s and stuff. That was always cool and available to us. But like the DCU initiative, where they, I think, really tried very hard to get that new Image 20-something audience. And it's like, as cute as it is, and I love Heath Corson, and I love the guy that did that Bizarro miniseries, and it was adorable. But it's like, I don't know if the 20-something kid gives a shit about Bizarro, as adorable and as great as that comic was. They're coming in for Saga, and they're not necessarily thinking, oh, DC's doing Prez again. Let me check out this cool version of Prez. Right. And that's the thing. It's like, I think they have to really recognize who's supporting their stuff. And also, it is interesting that they, on the television and film standpoint, people can't get enough of Iron Man and the Avengers and the CW Arrowverse of DC characters that they're exposed to. And how much of that is really translating into the comics. They're trying. And certainly DC is trying. They're doing those, like they did that Flash season 0 that obviously took from the television continuity and extending the Smallville continuity in the comics, and Arrowhead, I know it.
Well, for a while there, they even had some of the writers from the TV show were working on some of those books. They brought some of the characters into the comics. So, I don't know that it does translate. Most retailers I talk to, when it comes to superhero movies and superhero TV shows, they don't see a lot of people then come into the store and say, "Oh my gosh, I want to keep reading. I want to, read this stuff." And I've certainly interacted with people because I'll run into people who ask what I do, for a living or whatever. Certainly, some of my kids' friends, and when I say, DC Comics or Marvel Comics or something like that, they immediately say, "Oh my gosh, I love the Flash. Do you have any, I love watching the TV show. Do you have any Flash comics you can give me?" And sure, because I've got comics laying around, and I'll give them comics. But these aren't. They're like, oh, that was really neat, but I don't see them like run into the comic store to get. You know what I mean? Like
Where's Cisco?
It doesn't quite translate.
Yeah, where are those characters that they?
Translate.
Yeah, where are the characters that they love from the TV show? Why isn't Felicity in the Green Arrow comic?
Well, it's just a very different. I think it's just a different experience. I think you have to be a reader.
Agreed.
You have to be a certain. I don't know. There's just it doesn't always translate. That said, a lot of the non-superhero fare seems to get people in the door.
Yep.
Like obviously with The Walking Dead, good Lord, when that became so huge, then the sales of those collections just went through the roof.
Yeah.
So that does seem to translate to people walking in the store and saying, hey, I'm really into this graphic novel that's on television, so now I want to read the graphic novel. But I don't, from what I understand from retailers, if it's not a character that's been around since the 1940s and everybody's heard of Batman, like when a Batman movie comes out, people don't go, oh my gosh, I got to read the source material.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But when something completely they've never heard of before comes out and then they hear it's a graphic novel, they do want to read the source material. So I think it's a little bit different translation, but it helps the industry. I mean, obviously people coming in for The Walking Dead, then they'll say, hey, have you read this other thing by Kirkman or this other thing coming out from Skybound or something?
Yep.
You know, they'll lead them to something else. So yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely good for the industry that being a quote unquote geek is cool now, you know, or being into superheroes is really cool.
Yeah, it's funny because I would always say the comics culture, but now it really isn't necessarily the comics culture, but it is like, yeah, they love Flash, they love Green Arrow, they love watching, the Marvel movies. I'm still not convinced, unfortunately. And I know, they keep trying on the TV side with Marvel. And Boy Loeb, if you're listening, I apologize, but I'm talking to him in a few weeks. This whole the Inhumans thing, is fascinating, and I don't know this is going to be very interesting. If literally,
dude, there's these friends of mine. This is crazy. Like there's these friends of mine. Where were we? I don't even remember now, but they mentioned they're going to a movie later tonight or something like that. And I said, oh, what are you going to see? And they said, we're going to see the Inhumans. And I said, well, it's a TV show. And I guess I hadn't caught that they were showing it in movie theaters. And somehow then talking about it and everything, I ended up going in the movie theater and watching it.
Oh, talk to me.
Very cool.
Is it good?
I thought it was good, but then I love the Inhumans.
Well,
that's one comic with Mark.
Me too.
I like I love that whole mythology. But I thought it was good. I thought it was good.
I've only seen
and the people with me who do not read they don't read comic books. They didn't know anything about anything. They said, in fact, they were convinced that this was going to be what did they think it was? This is going to be way back in time, the origin story. Like way back where did the Inhumans first come from? And I said, I don't know. I bet you it's present day, and they're on the moon,
right?
And I was right. Because that's what the comics are. They actually interact with the Marvel universe, and I said I think they're probably going to interact with like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything.
Sure.
And I liked it. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next. Well, I liked it. I enjoyed it.
It's weird though because again, that's the first positive thing I've heard about it, and truly, and again, I didn't see it in the IMAX. I'm like, no, I'll wait for TV.
Well, you are going to have a fun discussion with Loeb.
Because and I'm sure maybe you heard the same behind the scenes things, maybe not, but I also heard that Ike Perlmutter, who's in charge of Marvel, was pretty specific in terms of, first of all, it was almost an I'll show Kevin Feige kind of thing because Inhumans originally was supposed to be a movie on the cinematic slate. Yeah. Gets taken off after the end of the relationship between Marvel movies and the rest of Marvel. Kevin Feige has constructed you want to go to a wall. If Donald Trump needs someone to build a wall, go to Kevin Feige because he knows how to build one. That's the thing. Like, no, I want nothing to do with the comic side of Marvel, the television side of Marvel, and this wall now exists. Again, I look forward to talking to Loeb and hearing how he would perceive any sort of relationship that the cinematic universe and the TV universe still has. All that said, that also they were given a very specific budget of this is how much money Marvel is willing to spend on this show, and coming from the top, coming from a guy like Perlmutter. and that it was like, all right, well, we'll do our best. And the TV show, the 2-part pilot that they made, and I don't know how many episodes they've already made. I'm assuming at least half a season, at least an initial 13 or 9, something like that. Are kind of, again, the budget really kind of dictated what they could and couldn't do, and as a consequence,
well, I'll tell you right now, that was pretty obvious. And being someone who's watched enough of these TV shows, I mean, it was kind of obvious, because those really cool powers that you see in the beginning, I won't spoil what happens, although I'm sure people probably know. Again, I didn't keep up. I didn't know it was going to be in a movie theater. Well, I'll go see it. I didn't know a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, but I mean, I knew some of it. I'd heard some of that, but yeah, by the end of the second episode, like, they're not able to use a lot of those powers anymore. Like, things happen. So that really expensive special effects aren't necessary anymore, because those powers aren't there anymore. So yeah, I did think about that I don't know. Well, see, I watched it. It was kind of just all one long thing, not 2 different episodes, but I would say about halfway through what I would perceive to be about halfway through the second episode, I did become aware of, okay, well, this isn't going to be as cool as that first part. Therefore, I can see where the third episode is definitely not going to be as cool as like the pilot or whatever, what I saw at the beginning. So we'll see. Well,
did you hear?
But I liked it. Okay. But then I got kind of tired of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I could see myself getting kind of tired of.
Well, I felt
the same way. How did this turn into a review of Marvel television?
Well, honestly, because I want to hear, hey, you're one of us, and
this is why I don't do reviews, though. On Newsarama, I don't do reviews because when I watch something, I'm like, oh, that was cool, and that's my critique.
I understand.
People go, well, what about this and this and this, and I'll say, yeah, you're right. That was kind of dumb, but it was cool. Overall, it was cool.
No, it's okay. I mean, honestly, I don't do reviews on my show either, and my platform. People know that I talk to the people that I like. And that's my review. If you're not hearing a lot about an X-Men book, it might be because I'm not reading that X-Men book. It's that simple. But all that said, no, I think this stuff is all part of the conversation. And also, I mean, again, we're watching these big companies, get an opportunity to really be part of mainstream culture in a way that it hadn't been. I mean, it had in the past. I mean, I always like to point out, and every now and then at a convention, guess what? In the days of old-time radio, there was a lot of comic book media programming going on, and you would be shocked at some of the things, like Archie lasted on the radio for almost 15 years. That's pretty impressive. Stuff like the Superman serial, all the Green Hornet, all that stuff. So it was just as valid then as it may be now. And again, it was more for a juvenile audience, but again, it was millions of listeners, so you can't deny that happened, and also even the spurts in the 50s and 60s with TV and 70s. So now it's a chance to really, as we said, that the stories have become more sophisticated in comics, the same with the television and movie fare. And yeah, there's an expectation that goes along with that. But also, the reason why I bring up the Inhumans, maybe you don't know or heard, but they might just only show the pilot, the two parts of the pilot, and then that's it. And I think that's very interesting.
I did hear
that. There you go. And that's why, I'm fascinated.
I did hear that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
See, I really, here's another thing that I kind of wish that people could see more than like I said, the pilot, and they made it very clear, okay, we don't have the budget to keep this up. The first part of it, I mean, to me as a fan, and I think that's I remember going into that first Spider-Man movie, and oh my gosh, with CG, so as a fan, the part of it is just, oh my gosh, my comic book heroes realized in real life. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Like, there was just a very cool thing about that. So, I mean, yeah.
No, I get it.
I don't know what's going to happen with it. I thought it was cool. I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. I would definitely come back and watch the third episode.
The third episode?
If I watch those two. But I would.
Well, while we're on this,
I would. I definitely would.
While we're on the same subject, I forget, are you a Star Trek person?
I'm somewhat into Star Trek. I used to be much more into Star Trek. I'm not a big fan of the reboot. Did
you see even the free episode on CBS?
I did. My husband and I watched it. And and we honestly didn't like plan ahead. We just happened upon it. So I missed the very beginning of it, but wow, was that an adjustment.
Yeah.
Like it just was done very differently. I'm not necessarily saying, obviously there were parts of it that just kind of make you cringe, because it had that kind of humor, that just kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm just not a person for that kind of humor. But then there were parts of it that, I don't know, I kind of enjoyed. It was a breath of fresh air, but I don't know if that can make it. I don't know that it would appeal to me, and I kind of think most people who are going to be watching Star Trek on television would be more like me. I don't know.
Well, that's
what did you think?
Well, I'll tell you, because I am a huge Star Trek fan and bought CBS All Access intending to watch the entire series, whether it's great or it sucks, because I'm happy to watch anything that's called Star Trek. And I have, I felt like the JJ movies have been up and down in quality. I thought the first one was great. I thought the second one, they tried way too hard with fan service, and
right.
And I think that's
I agree with that.
The sandcastle kind of fell apart because of it. Third one was better, a lot better, but I still have my little
I agree with that.
Quirks. Okay, so Discovery. First of all, CBS made, and this is really the first opportunity I've had to talk about this at length on the podcast. CBS made a huge mistake not showing both parts on free TV, because
really?
I thought so, and I'm interested in your feeling, but I thought the first hour was too much of a tease and not enough of a complete even story, because the second episode does end on a cliffhanger, and it's really a prologue for the entire What's to Come series. And that's why it should have been presented as a 2-hour, this is the direction we're going, here's enough of a full story that if you want to bail, I mean, because I say this about comic books as well, that it's really important for a first issue to feel like, okay, I get where we're going, at least something happened in the comic that made me feel like, okay, I get it, and maybe shame on me for expecting a bit of a resolution. And it doesn't need to be a positive resolution, but it needs to say the story started here, and to end right at the beginning of a Klingon battle and just be like, okay, see you later. If you want more, go. You got to pay. It's like, well, that's kind of shitty. And I really think they might have gotten more. And I'll be interested. I'm sure we'll never know how many viewers we got going to CBS All Access, or ultimately how many they get. But it will be interesting to see if the numbers are enough that they do, because right now they're saying, oh, yeah, no, we're going to continue this story beyond these 15 episodes and give you another story about this crew and this ship. And it's like, okay, but we'll see how many people actually make the leap. I personally felt like
I'll tell you, I would not continue watching it from what was on TV, what I saw. So, but I don't know. So I can't judge whether or not, if they had shown more,
well, that's,
would be better, because all I saw was what they and I would not continue. But like I said, I'm not. I ran out when the first
J.J. Abrams.
JJ's first movie. I was at the midnight showing. I was very excited. But then I saw this. I don't think I was quite as excited about this. I just didn't like that everything was being rebooted. Like everything went away. I know I'm such a fanboy. Cool. I'm using that in a negative term. But then I liked the second one, and I liked the third one. I liked the third one a little bit better. But I don't know. I miss Jean-Luc Picard, and
sure.
I don't know. I miss the old continuity. I just kind of wanted to see that.
Well, I understand. And also there's some sort of weird rights issue because originally CBS and Paramount were all under the Viacom arm, and then Viacom split off all of its parts and then reassembled, and CBS owns the IP of Star Trek, the intellectual property for people who don't understand IP. And then, but there's something going on where Paramount has the right to show the movies, but CBS gets a lot of leeway in terms of what they can and can't do. And it's weird because I was looking forward to the TV show to get away from Bad Robot and J.J. Abrams' company and get some fresh eyes and fresh perspective. And there are a lot of fresh eyes and fresh perspective on Star Trek Discovery. But obviously something will happen to make Brian Fuller leave. something else happened that it looks more like the J.J. Abrams universe as opposed to classic Star Trek. And I don't buy the technology is one thing, and that that's enough for a lot of fans to get angry about and say it looks way too sophisticated to be 10 years before the solid state 8-track tape world of Star Trek back in the 60s.
Right.
But I understand that from an aesthetic standpoint, and also hopefully getting more of a mainstream audience. I get all that. But my problem more was from just a few choices character-wise and things, but also ultimately that specifically about this presentation, like I said, I don't think they gave people enough in that free sample. And I think it's going to hurt them. And I'll be very interested to watch, much like the progression of the Netflix shows and all these other streaming platforms, and also the over-the-air, and including basic cable and pay cable examples. We're going to get Watchmen again, it looks like, on HBO, or at least they're going to make a pilot.
Gosh.
I'm psyched.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but it's such a great story, and I liked the 2009 movie.
No, it is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's so much. It's amazing to me. It is, because as you and I know, like, there was a point where there was nothing or very, very little, and it's just amazing that there's so much. But that's the cool thing about it, is that I can say, I'm not going to watch that. I am going to watch this, because there's enough of a choice. I don't feel like, if there was only one show on, you would almost feel like you have to watch it just to keep up with. But I don't know. I don't know. There's so much.
Like, are you watching the CW DC stuff?
Yeah, I have lost track on Arrow. I've kind of fallen off, but I love the Flash. I'm such a Flash fangirl. Oh my gosh! And I like Supergirl. I like Supergirl.
I like Supergirl a lot. Yeah. And Legends. I'll even admit I like Legends. Legends is like the.
No, I like Legends too. Although I don't watch it weekly when it's on, but we catch up on it.
Me too. That's how I watch
it. Just because, I have a busy life.
Hey,
so,
bud.
But with that Flash, I'm literally, like, sitting on the couch on Tuesday nights ready to, it's like, I got to see what happens during that.
No,
So with those different levels of excitement, and my husband and I have watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. since the beginning, and we lost a little, you're losing excitement for it when there's, like, 4 episodes on the DVR you haven't watched, that kind of thing. That's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
Kind of where we were last season, but still watch it. We still watch it, and still
S.H.I.E.L.D.
still like the characters. And
I would say S.H.I.E.L.D. and Gotham for me are the shows that
Gotham lost.
Well, you see, I'll watch, and it got like this with Smallville until the final couple seasons, but it was like I'll watch the premiere, and then I'll watch the cliffhanger. I'll make sure that I'll watch the season-ending cliffhanger, and I feel like I haven't really missed much. And that's kind of how I feel about Gotham, and that's kind of how I feel about S.H.I.E.L.D. And although it was interesting, I was just at the Salt Lake City convention and was on a couple panels talking about the TV shows. And both from the audience and their other panelists, they all say that this last season of S.H.I.E.L.D. literally was the best. And that they almost broke up into 3 mini story arcs. The Ghost Rider arc, the, I believe... Patriot running S.H.I.E.L.D., Jeff Mace running S.H.I.E.L.D.,
which I like. I like that.
Me too.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
So I'm going to kind of go back and
no, it was definitely there were some very heartbreak. Did you watch the whole season?
No, I got to catch up. I got to catch up before I talk to Jeff.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, then I won't blow some of it. But there were some. There were some tears in your eyes kind of moments, and there was some really interesting what if kind of things, where characters were challenged. So I will say that I can understand why they think it was a great season, but I don't know. But at the same time, I don't know why, but it lost a little bit of overall interest for me. So I don't know.
How about the Netflix stuff?
Oh, I love the Netflix stuff.
All of it?
That's good stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Some of it better than others.
Sure.
I love Daredevil.
Yeah, me too.
That's my favorite. But I always loved the characters.
Me too.
They did it. They just, they did Daredevil right,
Yeah,
which it just you just can't. I remember like the second episode. I thought, I cannot believe they're actually doing this well. Yeah. Like you expect the worst. So yeah, that's the other series are good though. They're good. They're good. I like that they're building the kind of like a mini universe within the universe.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No, I completely
Kinda
agree.
Cool. Yeah.
The Defenders was better than Iron Fist. Obviously, and I kind of, it's funny because I almost was without, and everyone or so many people binged it immediately, and it was out on Friday, and already by Saturday night, it's like watched it, loved it, or hated it, and more people hated it, and I'm like, oh come on, man, it's Iron Fist, and even regardless of the argument, should Iron Fist have been Asian or not? I'm like, hey, I'm a huge Iron Fist fan. I'm going to watch this thing. And I have to admit, I had to slog through it. And it was the weakest of the shows. And it's interesting from a viewership standpoint that might have impacted the Defender numbers. I thought the Defenders was very good, but as I understand it, it's the least watched of all the shows. And I found that, and first of all, I'm surprised.
So you think maybe they watched after watching Iron Fist, they were like, it's enough of that.
Maybe I don't know, and it seems like that just on its own face value of suddenly less people are watching. I kind of wonder if that's the case, or that they're tired and that it's too much too quickly, and that maybe they need to space the series out a bit more to ensure it and let us miss this for a while before you come back with something new. I don't know. It's interesting. I love Barenthal as the Punisher, and I'm really looking forward to his series. And again, I really liked Defenders, and I loved how they did all come together. And you had Scott Glenn showing up as Stick, and you had Foggy and Luke Cage having conversations, and So no, I'm still loving the Netflix product, and it's. I'm looking forward to seeing again how much money can you spend. That's the other thing too. When we talk about this in comics, that there are too many good comics to buy. Good Christ, there's too many streaming services. It's how is unless you've fully cut the cord as far as cable goes and stuff. It's man, that's a hefty monthly entertainment cost to kind of keep this stuff going.
That's crazy. Now, remind me. See, I had no idea we were going to talk about this.
No, and forgive me. Honestly, I always like to talk as well. Not just about the comics, but really about everything that's going on. And again, I want to know.
I hear you. Remind me, because you're probably more well versed in this than I am. But isn't the Flash going to be shown more immediately on, I don't know if it's Hulu or Netflix, or it seems like they're going to get the new episodes like 2 weeks after they air on cable.
And I had heard something about that, and I don't know the specifics.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, possibly. And I'm going to
have to look that up, because
or is it on
walking away from cable,
or it may be on that Seed. CW Seed or whatever platform.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Tag on it. We're going to buy something else.
I know. Well, and obviously the Marvel stuff's going to move off of Netflix by 2019, and it'll be on Disney's little platform. MGM has announced its own platform, and it's San Diego. They teased a new Stargate prequel series, but it's only going to be on MGM's platform. It's like, okay, there's got to be. I don't know.
Something's got to unite this stuff. You would think. Like you and I, what we need to come up with is a platform, and then we make deals with all these people, and it's just called like Geek platform or comic book related or something like that. That's just anything that's related to, I don't know, science fiction or comic or superheroes or comic book, literature in any way, shape, or form. Like just we make deals with all of them, and you pay one fee, and you can see all this stuff, but we get nothing else from. We get nothing else from MGM. We get nothing else from Disney. Just the
science fiction,
related
just the superhero stuff. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, ideally, and I mean, again, Warner Brothers has enough of a library that it'll be interesting if that platform survives. I keep pointing out that there was that comedy streaming channel CISO, and they went under this summer because there weren't enough subscribers, and they had good content. They had Monty Python. They had Kids in the Hall. They were doing new stuff. They had a lot of great ideas as far as new programming and also the catalog that they were asking or providing. But yeah, there just wasn't enough, so they eventually went. It's really interesting, and again, much like the comic market, there's clearly oversaturation on the streaming services, and it's like, okay, I mean, already, Yahoo bailed out on it, Sony PlayStation bailed out. They were doing Powers with Bendis and Oming and everybody. So it's
well, I got to think part of it is that I don't know, if do they have like market share? I mean, I assume that Netflix is so much bigger than anybody else right now. Because I don't even know if I know very many people who don't have Netflix. If they have any kind of service, it's Netflix. So, and a few people may have Hulu
and Amazon Prime,
but really that's and then Amazon Prime and maybe all three. But really, I think that's the problem, is that these people are trying to break into a market that you really only have so much money to spend on this.
Absolutely. And bring it back to your why I had you on in the first place. Yes, indeed. No, it was interesting to read your articles too when you were asking the retailers about the price point right now for comics and stuff.
Oh yeah. Your favorite comics, you're probably not going to notice if it goes up $1. But or the big event comics. I mean, look at what's the Metal. Oh my gosh, and it's a higher priced comic, and it was just huge. Number one was, what was it, like 200 and some thousand copies of just outrageously high, even though it was not a low priced comic book. So, high quality or highly anticipated stuff, it just doesn't matter. But overall, so all these other little ancillary titles, people are going to think about it. They're not going to buy as many things if they don't have the money for it.
Absolutely.
And prices are going up. They just absolutely are going up.
Well, and I love that. I love that in contrast, the image creators with their self-create, their creator-owned books are like, no, $3, $3.50, that's all right. That's we make enough money from that, thank you. And the price point difference is glaring, and also I don't know. Again, I agree with you that the Buzz event will certainly get their numbers, and also I know Frank Miller. I want to read a new Frank Miller Batman comic, so I'll spend more money on that. Scott Snyder's a proven commodity. I'm happy for my buddy Tom King doing as well as he's doing. I think he's reaching that trust level and stuff, and Mr. Miracle's been wonderful for the 2 issues we've gotten so far. But it is interesting, and again, as they flirt with regular comics, slowly creeping up and stuff. Yeah, I don't know how many $4 comics of, like you said, the opposite of these known people that, well, I've never heard of this writer, and I don't know if I necessarily want to read. And again, I'm picking on poor Ant-Man. I love Ant-Man. And I loved what Nick Spencer did with Ant-Man. But yeah, it's like, I don't know if I necessarily need to read.
But if you know for sure that it's not going to cross over in a great way with the Avengers and Spider-Man or anything like that, it's just Ant-Man and his buddies, you're just, and you don't know the creator or whatever. It's just, it's going to be tough to justify spending that kind of money. And I think that it also goes back to, we're talking about these 30-something readers that are the core of the direct market industry, and how, that cannot continue. Not to say that we won't all live a ripe old age, but it can't. There's got to be new blood, and it's very hard to justify to a young person who pays $12 a month and gets Daredevil and Defenders and all this cool stuff. That they should go out and spend for for 6 issues as much as we're asking them to spend in the comic book store. It's hard from an entertainment standpoint to justify that. That conversation has been going on a while, but I think it's even more relevant when you realize that the aging of the comic book reader and how really these are people who did not have those other choices probably when they first got hooked on comic books.
Agreed. Well,
right?
Yeah.
So, somebody who's 38, 20 years ago, when they first got hooked on comic books, probably they didn't have all of these other entertainment options. you know.
No, absolutely, no question.
They had maybe the arcade,
right? Totally, exactly.
The mall, yeah. And they might have had cable, but
right. No,
yeah,
I
when any
agree.
superheroes on TV, and Blade had just come out, you know.
It's true.
I mean, that's the environment we had 20 years ago, you know?
Yeah, and again, that's why it's really, really interesting. And when the complaints of, we're at that oversaturation point with superhero movies, and I'm like, I don't think so. And, again, TV.
It doesn't appear to be true. I'll tell you, when it first all started getting, like, it just felt like, oh, my gosh, there's just so many superhero movies in the mid-2000s, right? The mid-aughts. It did feel like, you know, we keep saying, we've been around a while, but you remember the disaster movie craze.
Yes, of course.
Or even the Western craze, right?
Bingo. That's exactly my point, is the Western. Go on.
But so you just kind of, I don't know. I completely understood the point of view that there's going to be a point when people get a hold or get tired of superheroes. And I still can't help thinking maybe it'll come, but it has lasted a long time, and it doesn't feel like there's less interest. In fact, it feels like there's more. There's a whole new younger generation, you know, coming up, and they've gone back and watched. I mean, they're rebooting they rebooted Spider-Man, and they're possibly another Batman. And I mean, it's just like, it just keeps going, and the people just keep flocking to the movie theaters to see this stuff. If it's good, if it's good.
Well, but that's the thing. I think we're even at a genre point where, and we already have survived a few bad movies, and it's like that hasn't killed the genre, and in the way that some other bad movies have killed previous genres. But like you said with the Western, that's been when people say, I think maybe it's, time, it's just getting oversaturated. I'm like, really? The Western lasted like a good 70 years before people are like, all right, enough with the Western, let's pull back. And even then, it was only a couple years between the decline through the 70s and Silverado coming in the 80s and everyone falling in love with Westerns again, at least to the point of them existing and progressing, not at the same level as they did from the 20s or even the teens through the early 70s into the spaghetti Westerns and the early 70s Westerns. But that's the thing. And the other thing...
Well, that's the thing, though. Those things came out... They came out constantly. Yep. I mean, I was a kid then, so I don't know that. But I know enough about cinema history that, I mean, they were making them like crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
And they were coming out constantly. Superhero movies do not come out constantly. Now, do we have a few every summer? Yes. But, I mean, from what I understand, I mean, they were just pumping out those Western, the spaghetti Westerns. And
again...
So, I mean, it's a completely different thing. I don't know that we've become oversaturated. That said, it does seem like they're the main blockbusters every year are superhero movies.
Right. Well, and further, with the Western analogy, they went from being very simple in the silent era because they had to be, because of the simplicity of silent films. But then we got into characterization. Then in the 50s, they got into anti-hero Westerns and different points of view. And maybe the bad guy isn't completely bad. And I think we still are, even 20 years in, just flirting with the different things you can do with superhero movies. And Deadpool is a classic example of that. Guardians is a great example of that. And that's the thing. So it's like, no, I really think that there's room to experiment and to innovate still in the superhero films to keep them interesting and fresh. And even Star Trek Discovery, from a basic narrative standpoint, deciding, and at least based on the first two episodes, that we're really with Michael Burnham, the lead character, rather than an entire crew. And that it's more her story. And I've even, like, a few times thought about, is this like Star Trek's Breaking Bad, not in terms of the dysfunction, but in terms of, no, we're following, this is the story of one character in the Star Trek universe. And I might be proven otherwise as we watch the other 13 episodes. But, and again, I think the same thing can be said for the comics or the comic book inspired films, that there's still plenty of places to go and innovate. God, Legion. Did you watch Legion on FX?
No, I did not.
It's amazing. And it's really like,
wow.
It's truly, again, I mean, like, I was talking to Liefeld about the Deadpool movie, And he's like, Stan Lee grabbed me by the shoulders and is like, this is a game changer when it comes to the Deadpool movie. And it's like, yeah, it was. And the same I would say about Legion. I mean, Legion really visually and storytelling wise, and truly, hey, A, I hate the X-Men, and B, I don't give a shit about Xavier's son that can change reality until I watch this show. And I'm like, oh my God, this is an incredible character. And no, it's amazing. It's so 9 episodes only, so it's so worth watching if you have cable and it's still available on demand. I've kept it on my DVR to rewatch it and everything, and it's complicated.
Well, I have it I think I have the FX.
Okay, good.
App or FX.
I'm sure it's on there.
Yeah, because I've watched other stuff on there.
It's complex in the same way that The Prisoner in the '60s was complex. And it really makes
wow, that's awesome.
I think it really makes the viewer rewatch things and understand. Like, I don't know if I caught all that. Let me watch. I mean, it demands your attention, and it's great.
So you're saying so superhero movies maybe have reached or are nearing reaching the limit of the origin story of the unlikely hero or whatever, but there's plenty of places that they can go thematically.
I think so. I totally think so. I mean, just as we saw in the comics in the in that 80s period and on, and that innovation and storytelling and characterization. No, and that's the thing, man. It's like, we're just at the start. I mean, and that's okay because for the general audience, you have to introduce them to superhero contrivances and rules about storytelling and things that we accept now. But again, they're not used to it. So no, and I do. I
totally agree with you. Like, I think Logan was a really good example of that. Like, which was a fantastic. I actually saw it twice in the movie. I said, I think I'm going to check out Legion.
See, and that's the thing. And like you said earlier, that you're like, well, they're not coming out in the heavy way that Westerns did at their at their apex and everything. But it's like,
well, and cheaply made. I mean,
absolutely,
really cheaply made Westerns.
Monogram, all those Poverty Row studios.
I don't think you could do a cheaply made superhero movie. I mean, you could, obviously, watch YouTube.
Right.
But, you can't. They're not releasing really cheaply made, constantly churning them out superhero movies. So it's probably not comparable. But in a way, like you said, it kind of is. They're evolving.
Well, and also, like I said, or what I was going to say, too, is that, we are getting superhero movies every couple months. And while we're watching the new one that's in theaters, last year's movies are on cable. Again, every fall we've got a new slate of a dozen comic-inspired
TV
shows on the air. So we're getting a lot, actually. I mean, it's but it'll be interesting. And also, again, it's interesting the ones that work and the ones that don't, and the reasons why they do or don't work and everything. So no, that's why I wanted to include it in the conversation. I find it fascinating. So.
Definitely.
Have I wasted too much of your time?
No,
again, first.
No. I'm totally down with this. Yeah, I know. I'll tell you, the last. Did you like Wonder Woman?
Yes, I did. Very much.
The movie.
Very much.
Yeah.
The only thing, it still has a little bit of that tough to find sunlight in a DC cinematic movie. No, I think Patty Jenkins did an incredible job. God, I love Gal Gadot, and she's so perfect. And she hit notes of Wonder Woman that came all at the same time because her portrayal is different from Linda Carter's and my friend Susan Eisenberg, the animated Wonder Woman on so many of the DC animation projects and stuff. But it works, and God, she just hit every note right, and she seems tough, and she seems very formidable and capable, but also sweet and innocent.
Compassionate and caring and like everything that you think about, and intelligent and
but naive as well.
And naive, and so,
the whole package.
I liked the portrayal. I don't know that the movie was perfect, but it was very good. It was good, and I'm really excited to see more of that character.
Agreed. Also, I am interested in seeing Justice League because I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of the Zack Snyder films. I think that they went in the wrong direction. Having Joss Whedon come in, and we all know that he did shoot extra scenes. He also oversaw the post-production and the editing. So a lot can change in a film, in the editing room, in post-production, and when you add a different director in different scenes. We know this from history because Superman 2 had basically 50-50 of Richard Donner and and Richard Lester. And that, again, we now see with the Donner cut the differences between the two films. It'll be interesting to see what, I always find the same reason why I found AI such an interesting movie. It was a failure, but it was an interesting failure because you could see the Kubrick in the movie and you could see the Spielberg in the movie. Uh-huh. And also the same thing with this Ron Howard Star Wars film, the Han Solo film. It's going to be interesting to see the Lego guys in their half of the movie and what Ron Howard's bringing to the movie. So I think those are interesting. And also even the choices of, well, in the case of Zack Snyder, obviously, unfortunately, personal problems in the family and stuff kept him from finishing the film. Right. But yeah, I welcome a Joss Whedon's voice to the DC universe because I think gets the work on the X-Men stuff, obviously the Buffyverse stuff, that all speaks to knowing storytelling. Good storytelling. Definitely.
And I think that, you as successful as the Avengers was, and really it was the first bring together all these different heroes onto a team kind of movie, and did so well, and definitely had Joss Whedon's voice in it. Especially if you knew his TV work and his comic book writing, you saw, his fingerprints all over it. But yeah, you were talking earlier about the level of trust for certain creators on comic books, and I think with a team or a movie team up, and having seen what Batman versus Superman was, I do have a level of trust for Joss Whedon to be touching the Justice League movie. And so, yeah, it does. It's a good feeling to know that he's involved. That said, you also walk into it with a little trepidation because, we've been burnt on some things before. Absolutely. So, superhero movies are, I think it's worse if you're a comic book fan or you're a fan of the movie, because I think it's worse when it's not that good. It's worse for us because we really were rooting for it, or we really had expectations, or we know the characters can be good. Exactly. I think that's part of it too, is somebody who walks into a movie and they go, well, that character just, isn't any good. We're like, no, no, it's a great character.
Yeah. So, did you feel that way about
a Justice League movie could be great.
Did you feel that way about Suicide Squad? Because that's the thing. I think the nerds, all of us that know how great Suicide Squad could be, went in and said that really sucked. And then there were those mainstream non-comic fans that are like, that was all right. And I think that's why it ultimately still made money and did a lot better than I think a lot of us hardcore nerds were, expecting it to do. And it's like, well, you can't argue with people. If they liked it, that's fine. But again, like you said, we just know how great it can be. And I didn't care for the movie. I thought it was a big disappointment.
Yeah, I walked away from it not particularly liking it, but not hating it either. I could see the appeal, and I understand why they took Harley Quinn in particular and want to do more with that character. You can see it you can see what kind of sticks out from that movie and what people were really more interested in, and talked about, online and stuff, and the costumes and Halloween,
Yeah.
So yeah, you can tell what really wowed people about that movie. I think that probably is a good example, because I think a lot of it was, it could have been better because we know Suicide Squad could be, you know what I mean? It could be better. So
no, exactly. We don't know. Again, that's the thing. It's fun to observe what's going on, seeing what the mainstream reaction is, seeing what the comics culture reaction is, and honestly, that's why I like doing these conversations every now and then with people like yourself that do observe and are consuming this stuff, but also thinking beyond what we're getting on the screen in terms of how does this affect the company, how does this affect the comics in a positive or negative way, and what's again how these experiments are played out.
Yeah. Now, what do you think of just constantly new actors playing the same? When a character is so big,
agreed,
that
you can still enjoy a completely different actor in that role, like within it feels like a very short time period. And yet I kind of like them both. I like they brought different things, with Spider-Man and I know that, I mean, they're going to have to reboot a lot of the Marvel heroes because they're getting up there in years, right?
Well, yes.
The actors who play them.
Absolutely. No, I had this conversation with Loeb back in 2015, I think, the last time we talked. And I'm just like, what do you do when Robert Downey Jr. is a 60-year-old Tony Stark? Do you hand the role to a new actor when this guy has been Tony Stark for an entire generation of people? It works in James Bond. I would argue that it has worked with Batman. It's worked with Spider-Man, although we had that middle part with, I didn't think it was Andrew Garfield's fault, but those two movies certainly didn't do as well as the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire movies. And again, I love Tom Holland. I think he's terrific as the new Spider-Man. But it will be interesting to watch. Do you reboot, or do you just do like the Bond movies and just keep going? And okay, Chris Evans isn't Captain America now. It's Bradley Cooper, or it's somebody younger. It most likely would be somebody younger. I don't know. I don't know. A good blue-eyed blonde.
Do you continue? Right, and there's a choice between, do you continue the current continuity or make a new one like they have done with the Spider-Man movies? So does Tony Stark say, well, I'm going to, sit in the tower, and here I'm going to give this to my niece?
Sure. Riri Williams.
And
maybe she's the next
over, or nephew, or whatever. Or do you just completely start over, or do you do, I don't know.
Well, that's
like what Star Trek did, like somebody goes through a wormhole. It's a whole new bunch of actors.
Well, did you not like that solution in terms of it being an alternate universe?
No, I liked it. Okay, I don't know. I just, I'm an old fart.
Well, we're both old farts, and that's okay. But no, I'll tell you what I didn't like about the JJ verse. I think Zachary Quinto is a horrible Mr. Spock. I don't like that they. Well, hey man, he's a great actor, and I had the pleasure of meeting him about 10 years ago in Orlando when he was still doing Heroes, and I think he's a tremendous actor, truly. It's not his fault. It's much like my problems with the various James Bond films that have failed. I never think it's the actor's fault. I think it comes down to the script and the direction, and giving Spock emotions in these movies invalidates the character, and he disappears. And now McCoy wins.
That's the problem, is that it's a different character. So there's just this huge part of me that every time the character is a little bit different than the character I know, I say huge part. I wince. I'm like, so I can't. It's hard for me to enjoy the movies. I'm thrilled that they're bringing these characters to a new set of people, a new generation. That's great. But you just, when you love a character so much, or you love a situation so much, or you love the way it happened the first time so much, it's very hard to sit through it happening a little bit differently than the next time with characters that you don't just things happen and you say that he wouldn't do that kind of thing.
Right.
And I don't know. There was also some plot holes here and there
definitely.
that I felt like were huge.
Well, and again, too much fan service. Okay, Kirk's dying, so I'm going to take blood from a tribble, and that's going to save Kirk. Fuck you. Give me a break. Oh, my God.
Seriously?
Yeah.
But this was that's the other thing, is that as if you completely walk away and if I had never seen any of the TV shows and I watched the movie, I wouldn't even probably have had a problem with the plot holes that much, because I watch movies all the time that have plot holes. So I said, don't sweat it. Don't worry about that.
Don't sweat
much.
it. Keep going.
But those TV shows, maybe not the originals, but so many of the Paramount TV ones, the Deep Space Nines and everything, they didn't have plot holes. Like they filled that stuff and they explained things, and so you had, I don't know if I have too much of an expectation of an intelligence behind these movies that I want applied to Star Trek more than Iron Man or whatever.
I agree.
I have an expectation. So to me, I don't know. The reboot kind of disappointed me, but I'm not a fan of it. But I mean, I I see the good, I see the bad.
I hear you. Well, and honestly,
the good is that people are getting to get to know James T. Kirk.
I would agree with that. And it's funny because back to Discovery, I hate the way they're portraying Sarek. I like the actor, and again, it's not his fault. It's the material they're given. But I just think that he's too emotional, and he isn't consistent with the Mark Lenard depiction of Sarah, or even Ben Cross in the JJ movies. And I also think that their declaration that, oh, no, this is in the Prime universe, this is in the original series and all the Paramount shows universe, it's not in the JJ verse. They've made that declaration, yet it looks like the JJ movies. And again, there are these differences in character approach that, again, the other thing that drives me nuts, and if I may, a final comment on Star Trek Discovery, is too much fantasy.
You're definitely into this.
Oh, I love, honestly, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I always say, if they made a show called Star Trek Klingon Latrine Cleaning, I would be watching every week. I wouldn't care. When does it start? So all that said, when I don't like that they made Sarek a character in this show, because the spin-off shows, William Riker did not have to be James Kirk's grandson to be interesting. And so there's I don't mind that Michael Burnham, the main character, was raised on Vulcan, but I'm like, so Sarek is literally the only Vulcan that thinks humans are worth anything. And I'm like, that's like saying Martin Luther King was the only civil rights leader. And it is that kind of like you're contracting science fiction instead of what you should be doing with science fiction, and that is expanding the ideas. And again, I don't know if it's that weird rights thing that's going on. I don't understand why it's another prequel and not let's move forward. I think there are really interesting stories to be explored in the post television series and even the beginning of Star Trek, the J.J. Abrams movie, where, Romulus is destroyed, so the Romulans have no home planet. All the terrible things that happened during the Dominion War in Deep Space Nine and opening up the Delta Quadrant in Voyager and stuff, it's like, there's a huge galaxy to still go through, and let's push the story forward. And also have the opportunity of, hey, what's Admiral Janeway doing these days? What's Admiral Riker doing these days? What's Ambassador Worf doing?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, exactly. See, there you go. And it's so, it just doesn't make sense. It's like, why don't you, that's how you pay back the fans, is have, that. And again, obviously it's easy for us to armchair and say, well, that's obvious and that's simple. There's got to be some sort of weird bean counting thing. I hear Les Moonves, the head of CBS, isn't a Star Trek person at all, gets confused with Star Trek and Star Wars. Which one are we talking about? Literally that kind of conversation.
Oh my
so,
gosh.
And that never helps. And it's happened before at the Paramount during the TV series days, where if you don't have somebody in the head chair that likes this stuff, it's just so ridiculous because you see what's going on with Star Wars. And also the financial jeopardy that Paramount itself is in. And it's like, well, we got something like that. How come we're not cranking that stuff out? Why isn't there an animated Star Trek series? Why isn't all this stuff being open? And apparently J.J. Abrams suggested, hey, I want to do all this stuff. And CBS is like, or Paramount, whoever owns the rights, are like, no, that's too much. And no, you can't go into that. No, you got to kind of... And I had heard that the idea of an alternate universe was created to, again, keep the other versions of Star Trek away from JJ, and that, okay, no, you do your own thing, but we're gonna kind of hang on to that stuff. Also, I had heard that JJ wanted the old stuff vaulted in the same way that they vault Disney movies, which I think is crazy and interesting, and I don't know if that's true or not, but that's another one of those rumors you hear. And as a Disney person, I know you'd appreciate that.
No, I totally understand what that means, and that's not a bad idea. But it's pretty crazy. I don't know. That it does seem like they're not taking advantage of the Star Trek fandom, because believe me, there's a Star Trek fandom out there, which it probably is aging. Speaking of 30-somethings or whatever, but. Gosh, I would love to be able to really get my kids into Star Trek and the whole mythology, but I can't. All I have are those movies.
I agree. No, I'm laughing because I agree with you, and I have 20-something nephews. The youngest 20-something nephew, when for a little while I was living with my sister and the two boys and stuff, And I'm watching Star Trek, and the youngest one, he was like 11, and he's like, I hate Star Trek. And I'm like, why? I'm like, space. And he goes, all they do is they talk, and let's go in this room and talk, and then they meet these other aliens, and you figure they're going to finally shoot somebody. Now let's sit down and talk. It's like, and I'm pounding the floor laughing.
But that's real. It's real. It's real. It's intelligent and
Agreed.
It's real. I'm sorry,
Agreed.
but people.
Well, and we were little kids, and we got into it.
I'm not going to put down the reboot.
No, but again, we were little kids, and we were watching the original series, and or at least I was.
We
so,
were.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why it was fine.
And I remember in college, we had like huge groups of people sitting around, like, Next Generation's coming on, everybody come on in. So, and I mean, all guys, girls, everything in between. I mean, everybody was interested in it. So it's not.
I agree.
I don't know. It's sad if really they need all the guns and battles and constant fighting to come on. The guy in the red shirt's going to die. That's not entertaining. I don't know what is.
No, I agree with that. Or kissing another green woman. Absolutely. We're all for it.
That's right.
Oh my God, you're killing it.
No, but they're right, and I still, they have that commercial. What is it? It's Mark Wahlberg, and then
he turns into Patrick Stewart. The mirror image.
He turns into Patrick Stewart, and then Patrick Stewart turns around and he's like, I'm better looking or something. I totally. He is better looking. He is John Picard, and I love him. I love him. And I'm sorry, but I just get turned on by someone who can sit in a room and negotiate and outsmart somebody. And that's who Jean-Luc was. He was not. He didn't go out. Now, granted, I love James T. Kirk too. Who's punching and rolling around in the deserts on some planet and getting the green girl and everything, but. I don't know. They had both. They had a little bit of both.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think I appreciate the intellectual exercise that Star Trek always asks. And I think, did you read? There's 2 books that came out in the last year during the 50th anniversary, and it was called the 50-year mission. And they were
no, but I will. I love Star Trek books.
Well, they're oral histories of the behind the scenes stuff. And they're amazing.
Okay. I thought it was a
fictional book. Yeah,
set in the fictional universe, which I love.
I love those too, and I'm a huge fan of the novels and the and also, by the way, IDW doing an amazing job, I think, with the comics. I agree. Absolutely. Well, the 50-year mission, they really get into Roddenberry's dictates that in the future we're all at peace on Earth, and the conflict can come from the other planets, but I don't want the Earth people in conflict. And that was interesting and a real writer's challenge for the next generation to try and make stories where everyone was in agreement. And, again, the conflict came from the planet. And that's why, if you remember, during Deep Space Nine, they did change things up. And even Major Roddenberry's like, Gene probably wouldn't approve of what you're doing. But that said, Deep Space Nine was fantastic because of that and all the conflict. And we know the basics of storytelling. You need conflict for good storytelling. But you got to applaud the way Next Generation was able to work, with that edict pretty strong. I mean, and that's the thing. That's what comes out of these behind-the-scenes conversations with the various writers and producers is Rick Berman is like, well, no, that's Gene's way. And even after Gene died, it's like, no, that's what makes Star Trek is Gene's belief on how Star Trek works. And he pretty much adhered to it until people like Ira Stephen Bear at Deep Space Nine and Michael Piller and to a degree as well on Voyager, where they finally were able to break free. And the best example is Enterprise, where they just felt like for the first 3 seasons, or at least the first 2 seasons, they were just going over the same stories over and over again. Then you had the Xindi War, but even better, that 4th season, where it's like they were fighting to survive. And I think their storytelling really took off and went into really interesting ways and honored the history of Star Trek, but doing it in a way that didn't change anything in a bad way, and still, it didn't, erase continuity. So that's why this Discovery show is fascinating, and honestly, I look forward to watching it throughout, and I hope I enjoy it as much as I did the first 2 episodes. So we'll see.
Well, I think that's one of the cool things about Star Trek too, is that, and I think in this day and age, because everybody's talking about it nowadays, is this hope for humanity, because it feels like the world is so divided, and I know a lot of it's just, you go out on the streets, people aren't as divided in person, but in the media, it feels like everyone's so divided, or on social media. But it certainly is bleeding over into a lot of the comic books we're reading, this idea of the future of humanity or the Earth. So it's really cool that, Gene had that, like, no, humanity is they're at peace. They've overcome all this
we'll eventually
crap.
get there. Well, and I appreciate that from an inspirational standpoint, but I hate to feel pessimistic, but it's like, I don't know. I just think in the end, there's a lot of very base human emotions that I think will always be with us. And yes, we should rise above them. And hopefully, in general, we do. But there's always just going to be a few assholes out there that are either selfish or mean. That it's again, on a very one-to-one level, might still screw things up. And I hope that next year, I don't know if this is going to be part of your conversation, or at the end of this year, if you come back to these conversations with retailers. Obviously, and it's something we talked a little bit about off the air. But there is a cultural war going on within comics right now too. And that's that, again, it's from an observational standpoint, it's very interesting to watch. It's sad in a lot of ways, because I think there are torchbearers. It's like Frankenstein when the villagers come with the torches, and it's not just, I disagree with the way you're writing this comic book, but it's like, you need to leave the business, and not only will I not support your product, but you shouldn't be allowed to be writing comics anymore. And I think that's a little too far.
Yeah, no, the politics of and social media just kind of ramps, like it amps it up. It brings it to a fever pitch, and those many comic book fans who don't even interact on Twitter or Facebook or whatever with the industry, but just enjoy their comic books, have no idea that that's going on. But there are people being very reactionary, and you have to apologize for that. And, oh, I'm sorry I did it, and you're going to lose your job. And it's kind of crazy to watch that stuff. I don't get involved in any of it. And I know you don't really either. In fact, sometimes we've accidentally stubbed our toe into it, not even realizing it. Oh my gosh. But it's kind of crazy. I think, I hope that's I completely hope that's not, and it doesn't seem like it's the core of the comic book industry. It seems like it's just this kind of fringe thing that goes on. I don't know.
And again, social media amplifies, I think, the voices that get that extreme on, God, again, I feel like an asshole because I don't want this misconstrued, but like, Trump said on both sides, and I don't mean it in terms of equating hate to a response to hate.
Right.
I mean that, again, something pisses off one side, whether you're liberal or conservative. And again, it's not only it usually never reaches the level of violence that we've seen lately in places like Charlottesville and Boston and places like that. But all that said, it does get loud, and I disagree with what this comic book is talking about. And again, this person needs to go away. And I have seen that happen on both the liberal and conservative side. And it's not, it bothers me. And some creators put themselves on the line by being so loud on social media with their views. I don't know. I'm shrugging. And again, like we said.
Well, and I think sometimes even things get misconstrued or things get seen as offensive that probably weren't meant to be. And then there's just this pile on mentality, and it's very strange, but it is definitely a social media thing. It is, and it's part. You're right that it's reflective of the culture as a whole, because you mentioned Charlottesville and you mentioned Trump, and because I feel like you look at. I mean, I think. Right now with the stupid NFL thing, like it's a terrible example. Well, no, actually it's a perfect example because neither side is listening to the other. It's just completely, they cannot hear each other, and it's over, something where I think on the core of the problem, I think they would both agree. But they're just so, like, one side sees this side as doing this, and just, they need to be fired, they need to be whatever. And it's definitely something that you see in the comic book industry. People are so reactionary. I don't know. Is it just, it's something that has either grown because of social media or... What do you think?
I think it is. I think it's that simple.
You're pointing out. I honestly have not thought this through. You're getting my brain going, and because I've seen it in the comic book industry, and I've definitely seen it growing within the last 10 to 15 years, and it's got to be social media, right? That people are more reactionary, they're more offended, they're more outraged.
Well, and also further, they've got a platform where there are no filters to keep them from saying what they want. This is a lot different than the letters page back in the day with comics, when you might get a slightly, I didn't like that issue. It was great. I loved reading Jack Kirby's letter pages when he was doing the war books at DC, like The Losers and stuff like that, and they had negative letters of, I don't like the way Kirby's doing this, I disagree or whatever. And it wasn't anything as volatile as some of the stuff today. But again, publishers could obviously control what letters they put on the letters page in that. And you also had Amazing Heroes and Comics Journal and other places where letters from readers would come. But now, Twitter and Facebook and all the other platforms are in your face. And suddenly Vader 28 has not only a platform, but, thousands of followers. And again, there's that I am Spartacus mentality where people just jump in and go, I agree. And by the way, yes, he should be fired. And it's like, well, yeah. where did you 25 people come from? I was just talking to Vader 28.
I was just going to say, there's some poor slob that actually has Vader 28 as their username. You've completely labeled him
hates me.
As a
he
friend.
Always talks about me. I don't even know who this guy is. That's so funny. You're right. That's my shorthand for anyone who hides behind an avatar and isn't willing to say, I'm Sam Jones. And by the way, no offense to Flash Gordon, Sam Jones, but I disagree, and I don't want these things to happen, because that's the thing. I think there are people that hide behind pseudonyms on social media, create an online persona for themselves that seems very powerful, and then you pull the curtain and it's like, all right, it's just another reader. It's just a guy that he has this opinion.
Well, I was just gonna say it's not only a virtual person that you're kind of creating online, but it's almost a virtual problem.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not a real problem.
Right.
I mean, okay, so I'm not enjoying my comic books. Maybe that is a problem. But this one character did this one thing, and you're going to try and get all your friends on Twitter to just harass the heck out of the writer who did it to this one. It's really, and you get all, like, they get so emotionally invested, and then the creator gets so emotionally invested, and it's all over this thing that's not a real problem. It's not really, again, I don't mean to minimize someone who, really cares about a character. I care about characters, and there's been times when they have been written well, and certainly I get I'm not happy about it, and I get upset about it, but it just seems like people have become so outraged. Their level of emotional investment, even time investment, because they spend so much time online talking about it, or like, it's just way higher than that issue deserves. And like I said, that's exactly what goes on with whatever the outrage of the day is. It seems like there's like an outrage of the week.
No question.
Everybody's talking about this quote unquote controversy, and it's not even meaningful. And 2 weeks later, nobody cares anymore.
100%. Yeah. Do you remember James Gunn got all that grief about a blog he made when he was making the film Super? And he just did this kind of like bad roast comedy style rant of the 50 superheroes and villains he wanted to have sex with. And they were villains, and they were men and women, and everybody was up in arms, and let's get a petition. This guy doesn't deserve to direct Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, 2 movies later, I think James Gunn is doing just fine. And what happened to that outrage? What happened to the torchbearers? Where are the villagers? How come they're not storming Frankenstein's castle like they did? 2 years ago or whatever. You're right. It's chewing gum, and it's on to the next outrage. So again, fascinating to watch, especially for you and I who have kind of gone through these being a fan or not a fan of the way they've depicted characters over a couple decades and stuff. And it's like, I don't care. Fine. And a year from now there'll be a new creative team, and somebody else will mess with Bizarro and make a different story. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty crazy, and my gut level, like I just want to, I don't know, confront these people and say, really, like it. I don't know. If you so are you saying that you care about? I don't know, whatever the issue is. The transgender people. Okay, so what are you doing to help transgender people? In your real life. Not the Twitter life, where you just have an avatar and you aren't a real person and it's not even a real problem because it's a character in a comic or whatever. But what are you doing in your real life, or poverty in the Black community? Are you volunteering? Are you going and talking? Do you even get out of your house? They're making like the problem that they're allegedly representing in this virtual world over these fictional things. Like they're not even. The real problem exists out there, and you doing all these things and getting so emotionally invested and getting so outraged is doing absolutely no good for that problem. Like it's not doing anything for that. You know what I mean?
I absolutely do.
Like I don't.
Yeah.
That's my gut reaction. But boy, we really got off the topic.
Yeah, I understand.
But I mean, not that it's not important. People say, well, it's important that these certain characters are represented right, or this problem is represented correctly. But I don't know. The level of outrage. I really think it is a social media thing. I think it's kind of the. I wonder will it get worse? As we're more plugged in and more temporary.
Yeah.
Even more temporary.
There are innocent.
Like it'll be the outrage of the hour.
And maybe we are going that way, and that's the thing. We might already. Nobody's driving, and guess what? We got a long stretch of highway left with nobody driving in the front seat. I don't know. Because it's. I think that there have been some stories that have been misconstrued as, well, you're offending this segment of people, and it's like, really, all I was. I mean, I've heard the transgender community get upset with. Like Justice League 3000, when J.M. DeMatteis was put a woman's or Guy Gardner's mind or his DNA in a woman's body, and transgender people got really upset. And it's like, wow, I was just thinking like mind swapping, like we used to see in science fiction mind swapping that has. And in fact, there was the Michelle Rodriguez movie in the last year or two, and I forget who directed it, where. I believe a man's mind is put in a woman's body. And shame on me for not remembering more of the details.
Well, and to be fair, Justice League 3000 was all about, like, cloning the DNA, but putting different... I mean, it was all about that. Like, they weren't clones. What were they? I don't even remember now. Like, they rebuilt them around... They were like symbiotes.
Exactly, they were human.
Like, they take a person and implant...
The DNA... Right, the DNA from the 21st century versions of the Justice League into these human bodies, and for the most part they worked.
So that's what it was all about.
There was one that kind of didn't work, and suddenly the transgender people said, "Hey, that's she's one of us." And JM's like, "God, I wasn't even thinking that," and it certainly wasn't my intention to offend, but by the same token, it wasn't in my mind that that's what I was creating, and. It's happened with some other characters as well, and it's tough. It's really, really tough. And again, I appreciate the want and desire to be represented, and I think it's important that the real world is reflected in comics. I think it's a very positive thing that when that happens. But I think also, I just think that there are some people that, again, art hits you in a certain way. I'm kind of shrugging and saying it's not their fault either, because art will hit you, and it's, hey, wait a minute, I see myself in that. In the same way that some people are like, hey, when you yell about Trump, you're yelling about me. And it's like, really? I wasn't yelling about you. You're the milkman. I don't think you're a jerk. I think you're a very nice person. I didn't know how you voted, but you're suddenly taking offense to the way I voted. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Right. It's the outrage.
Yeah.
Outrage of the day. Yeah. That said, speaking of representation, where are the empty nesters in comics?
Atta girl. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath for that one.
Honestly, that was kind of why I was bummed that they de-aged the Justice Society for a minute with Earth 2.
Oh, I know. That's true.
Because they honestly, Jeff and James Robinson and Goyer and all those guys that were part of that JSA run, there was a really good reason to have a senior set of heroes, not only to inspire the kids, but also to show, like, it was a good opportunity to be like, all right, so what happens to the over 40 superhero and over 50 and over 60 and stuff? And I think that's a place that can be explored. I'm looking forward to Mark Miller's Starlight, because that story in particular was about, like, Flash Gordon as a senior citizen suddenly, like, 30 years later after his prime, suddenly being like, hey, guess what? That planet's screwed up again. You got to come back. And how does the senior citizen Flash Gordon deal with an alien, uprising and stuff? And I thought, I loved that story. I thought it was fantastic. And it's so, like, waiting for, and Jesus, now I'm blanking on his name. What's his face from all the, the Qui-Gon from the Star Wars films, the actor.
Oh,
I know.
Oh, shoot. Qui-Gon Jinn, yeah. I can't
exactly, the Irish guy, let me tell you. If I find you, I will kill you.
I can't see his face. I can hear his accent.
No shit. And right now all the listeners are like,
he has a particular set of skills,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly. All right, I'm looking up his name so that everyone can stop yelling at us right now. You idiots!
A particular set of skills.
So take it. Liam Neeson. I didn't even have to finish.
I will kill
Liam Neeson, ladies and gentlemen. Of course we're talking about Liam Neeson. Yeah. We're tired and we've got brain farts happening right now, so you'll forgive us. But yes, Liam Neeson would be great. I don't want Bruce Willis to play that role. I want it to be Liam Neeson. It's got to be somebody a little more dashing than Bruce Willis. Should they make, and I hope that Netflix makes Starlight into a miniseries or a film. I'm all for it.
Well, I do think the JSA is coming back.
Yes.
I mean,
I would agree. How's our buddy Jeff Johns? I'm assuming you've talked to him more recently than I have.
I haven't talked to him in a while, but my goodness, does he have his hands in everything?
Yeah, and that's why I understand. He is, Heath Corson told me about, like, trying to get into a meeting with him about one of the animated movies that he was writing. And he said, like, literally, he's like, a dozen times it was somebody walking in with a toy or a call. Hey, we need this, note on a movie or a TV show. And he said, no, he is everywhere. And that's good because, he gets it. As far as, understanding why these heroes and stories work. So, I hope he's okay.
Well, I think his first movie that really he had the influence when he became more of, was given a position to have more influence on the movies. Pretty sure the first one that has come out is Wonder Woman.
Really? It's taken that
where he had a little more influence.
It's taken that long. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think so. If you go back on when he came in and you look at what was going on at the time, they were just starting up production on Wonder Woman.
Interesting.
Or even I think it was before that a little bit, because I think he even worked on that script a little bit before it even went into production. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the first one we've seen that he had any kind of influence.
Well, that's interesting.
Before that, he was more of like a consultant. He wasn't a big guy. He had big guys over him.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But I thought it was pretty good. So that we were talking about hope.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I understand. Hey, did you have a chance to talk to Heinberg about the movie?
Neither did not.
And I love Alan. He's great. And I was just wondering because he's like, and I get it. I think the non-disclosure agreements are tighter than ever. And sometimes might even last beyond the production and release of a film. So, and maybe he's already tied into the sequel. I have no idea. But I'm like, oh, dude, I'd love to talk to you about the experience. He's like, yeah, I can't. And he goes, you're awesome, but I can't.
Particularly since we're coming at it from, we can talk to him about the comic book
exactly.
He wrote, which I know it had all kinds of, like, delay problems. So it really ruined the momentum of what he was doing in that comic book. But he clearly brought back some
some things that had been missing from,
absolutely,
Wonder Woman mythos, and kind of changed things a little bit. And I think some of that got brought into the film, but I think a lot of sensibilities even from other runs got brought in as well. I don't think, I didn't watch that and I wouldn't go, oh, this is Heinberg's run, because I didn't feel like it was at all. But his run showed, his comic book run showed that, he really loved Wonder Woman and knew Wonder Woman and was interested in exploring different things about her. So I assume that he brought a lot of it with him when he put together the script.
I think so too. No, I absolutely think so. So I'm are you hearing anything about the Doomsday Clock?
Well, I mean,
that you can speak about?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm hearing some stuff. But, I mean, I think a lot of it is out there. I mean, I think we know. Well, we were talking about hope versus pessimism. That's what it's all about.
Interesting.
And that's what it is. And it's a very much a reaction to what was going on in the election and everything. I don't think it started out that when he first came up with the idea, it wasn't necessarily going to be that. But when he was really sitting down and plotting it and coming up with the script was when all that negativity was being thrown about. And that's what it became. And I think you're seeing that now. In fact, I know you're seeing that now. I talked to James Tynan. I don't remember when I talked to him, like Friday or Monday, or I think it was Monday. Boy, the days are bleeding together. But his Detective Comics story right now with Tim Drake, right? He's in that prison, the Mr. Oz Jor-El prison. This, these are spoilers.
Well, they revealed Jor-El a couple weeks ago.
Today, yeah. But anyway, the whole storyline. I won't like spoil everything about the storyline. Although it's in a story, I think that it ran today at my interview with him. So it's out there. But it's very much about hope, or optimism. Probably is the better optimism for humanity versus pessimism, because in today's issue, Tim comes across in the prison that he's in, he comes across a future version of himself who is more of a pessimist.
Interesting.
And this is a Tim that has become Batman. I don't know if you remember from Jeff Johns' run on.
I absolutely do, and that was a Batman that had a gun, and absolutely, it was a very disillusioned Tim Drake, absolutely.
Exactly. So that's who he's dealing with right now, and that's who he's going to be dealing with in the storyline going forward. So it's young optimist Tim versus I don't know that they're fighting, but they're at odds. I think actually at one point they are literally fighting, because they're going after the elder one is going after something that Tim doesn't want him to get to. But he's the pessimist, right? And then in Action Comics came out today. The next issue that explains
Jor-El.
How Jor-El became Mr. Oz, and what was done to him. We believe it was Dr. Manhattan that did it to him, although I'm still not convinced this is only Dr. Manhattan doing all this stuff. But what was done to Jor-El was he was grabbed at the moment that Krypton was destroyed, and he was sent to Earth, and he was made to experience and to watch terrible things from throughout humanity that made him believe there's no hope for humanity. Totally pessimist,
totally
right?
changed his view. Interesting.
Totally changed his view. So now he's saying to Superman, his son, he's saying, Cal, I'm sorry, I made a huge mistake sending you here. These people, there's no way, there's no redemption for them. Let's go. Let's get out of here. I apologize. Sent you the wrong place. And of course, Superman's like, well, wait, I still have hope for humanity. I still have hope for humanity. And Jor-El's saying, how can you have hope? And he sat and watched, he watched the Nazis, and he watched all, all these other stuff.
Yes.
So, and then Doomsday Clock is supposed to be Dr. Manhattan, the pessimist, versus Superman, the optimist. So this theme is going to be flowing throughout, and we talked about it earlier. Do we have hope for humanity? Is this this divisiveness that we see? Is it? You said there's a certain element
in humanity, it's always going to be there. Well, that stinks.
It does.
Well, or is Gene Roddenberry's vision really?
Well,
can we have hope
James
for
Kirk
humanity?
in the original series? We're killers, but we choose not to kill today, and that's the thing. That's there's the base of humanity, but we always should reach and aspire to be better than our base instincts. And yeah, you might hate that guy across the street, but you really, don't kill him and don't wish him that much ill. Maybe there's enough room on both sides of the street to live your lives and not be jerks to each other. And that's, it's the simpler version. But yeah, and also, God, I loved in the Justice League cartoon when they went to the Justice Lord's Earth and that wonderful Kevin Conroy conversation between the Batmen in terms of, God, this is order. We've got it controlled. And just, our Batman going, and one mom and dad be pleased with what you're doing. And it's just that great knowing yourself. And that's why the Tim Drake conversation is so intriguing because, yeah, it's like, that's the thing, man. It's both sides of it's the ego and the id, and which one is right. And really, maybe it is the combination that becomes the superego, if that's how it works. Shame on me. My Psych 101 class is failing me. But yeah, or the two evil Kirk and passive Kirk and the enemy within from the first season of the original series. No, you need both, man. You need to reconcile that within yourself and strive to be better. And that's great. That's a classic conflict to explore. And I think, again, that's why, because it's like, oh man, they're using Watchmen. And of course your gene kicks in of, oh, poor, Alan Moore once again. He's that. I always say Alan Moore is that guy, that guy that got divorced, and the wife got to keep the cool house with the amazing swimming pool, and everyone's playing in the swimming pool. And every time anyone sees Alan Moore, it's like, "Hey, man, I was at your old house the other day. We were having the best time in your swimming pool." And it's like, how does that not make Alan Moore just be like, "Yeah, fuck you. Please stop talking about my swimming pool."
No, worse. It's the guy he designed the swimming pool. And they had a really cool design for it, and she ripped it up and changed it. And everyone's playing in it. You know what I mean? Because I think that's really, like, he had a definitive beginning and a definitive end, and now, DC's like, well, we're going to put, a coda and a prequel and
I saw
other things. So I have no clue. I have no clue how this fits in to Watchmen. Jeff has said it's not a sequel. It's not and I think he's also said it's not a prequel. So I don't know. I don't quite understand it. But I do get the sense. That it's the real, like, can they not only can the heroes of the DCU stay convinced that there is hope for humanity, but maybe even convince
Dr. Manhattan
or overcome somehow the pessimism of Dr. Manhattan or whoever else is involved. Like, that's what it's going to come down to. As cheesy as that sounds, I bet Jeff will do it in a way that'll give you goosebumps. Oh, totally. And somehow it'll come through.
Come on, as a Flash fan, when you read that first issue of Rebirth, I mean, honestly, I every time I look at it and I think about it, I almost choke up. But when Barry, grabs Wally from the Speed Force and brings him back, and he's just like, Wally, how?
And says, how exactly. Could I forget?
Oh my God! Yeah. And exactly. Oh, I hear you. No, and it's that's the beauty of comics, man.
It was like DC. It was like the DC executives going, how could we forget Wally? I don't know. It was like, finally, thank you.
No, 100%. And another example on Marvel's side was, which I loved, the tragedy of the early issues of the Winter Soldier story, when Cap is like, oh my God, it's my best friend, and he's back. And he doesn't even know how important we are to each other.
Yeah.
And I remember Talon Brubaker. I'm like, this is beautiful, man. I'm like, you guys are like totally pulling on our heartstrings in terms of these two brothers that love each other and everything. And they're just like, I can't get through to my brother that I'm, don't worry, I'm your friend. I can make it okay again. And again, he just didn't know. And it was, it was great. And it played out amazingly. So yeah, no, that's the cool stuff.
It was. And somehow translated so well. I thought that translated really well.
Agreed.
To film.
Absolutely. Yes.
Like, I saw it in other people's eyes, like my kids' eyes. Like I saw them.
They understood.
They felt it. They really felt it.
That's cool. No, that's great. And again, a lot of it really was just subtext. And I also laughed when it was Cap needs a boyfriend, and it's like, oh, men can really love each other without needing to physically love each other, and can have love on a brotherly standpoint without it actually needing to be, an intimate relationship, that kind of love. But whatever, okay. Again, art is in the eye of the beholder. I understand, and it's fine if that's what you got from it. Awesome. So, what are you gonna? I'm shrugging. Exactly,
dude. Is there anything else we can talk about, possibly?
Welcome to the Armor Butchery, and we're just Vaneta and I, and actually, I am grinding hot dogs. Poor Vaneta's just along for the ride and watching the sausage come out of the grinder and everything. No. So, all right, well, we can wrap up because this has gone a lot longer than. And forgive me, hon, I didn't mean for us to go on as long as we did. But I hope I'm not keeping you from anything.
No.
Keeping you from the husband or anything.
No, it's okay. I reserved the evening for you.
Thanks, bud.
So,
absolutely, I miss you on the road, pal. I hope you're coming back to conventions.
I am. Now that I had told you last time we talked, is what was keeping me away was a lot of activities, and even in my own city, like 2 years in a row, the same weekend is like the big thing that was going on here. I had to be out of town for my daughter's stuff. It was crazy. So. But fully intend to hit the circuit again.
Well, I hope.
Yeah. So
possibly Chicago next spring, or you don't know.
Right. I don't know. Yeah, no, that'd be a great place to start.
Not too far.
Sounds good to me. Is that an invite?
Absolutely. No, honestly, I mean, you know how I feel and stuff, but when especially when it was you, me, and Matt, just exactly, just kind of like. In a stupor after a day of stories and chasing people down and the usual stuff and everything.
Uh-huh. And keeping each other calm, too. That's the other thing is that I feel like, I don't know, I think the last time I went to San Diego, I felt like so many of the people, I don't know, did you miss San Diego?
Early on, I've been going solid since 2010, but in 08 and 09 were the 2 years I missed.
I think San Diego, the last San Diego I went to was 09. I'm pretty sure you weren't there. Like nobody, none of my buddies, a few, maybe a couple. I hate to say that because somebody's going to go, "Hey, I was there," but like none of my usual con buddies, so to speak, were around. And I think we had Matt was gone, so we had new editor, and they gave me so much to do. And you know how hard it is to get around in that place. So they were like, go to this panel, and then, 4 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock, you got to be at this panel, and 6 o'clock. Oh, my gosh, I was going insane. And I said, I can't do this anymore. This is stupid. And I swore off San Diego for a while, and that kind of led to then so much was going on. I said, you know what, the convention thing, it's just too much. It's a lot of running around, and I wasn't enjoying it as much. And I had so many other conflicts. It was kind of a time when in my daughter's lives when I kind of needed to be around them.
Oh, absolutely.
Make sure that parties weren't tearing apart my house.
Oh, yeah, and also supporting her in her activities and all that. No, absolutely.
Yeah, and supporting her. So it all hit at the same time. I said, you know what, I'm going to take a couple of years break from conventions. But yeah, it has been. I think it was. I don't think you were at the last San Diego, so it must have been 2009 was my last San Diego, which is crazy to think about. It's been that long, but. San Diego, crazy.
And that's why I'll be interested.
I can't do it. And there were so many other writers who wanted to go and wanted to cover things. That was the other thing is I thought, do I need to be there? And that one I definitely didn't need to be there. But I'd like to go to WonderCon. I'd like to go to C2E2. I always love New York Comic-Con. I don't know why. I just love New York because everybody's there.
No, I'm with you. As we're talking, we're only a few days away from it. And I love New York. I hate the Javits Center. This year, it's a shame that you missed it because they really had in the North Wing, Artist Alley was its own separate area, and it really was this oasis from the rest of the con. Because after they merged the Anime Con and C2E2, or rather New York Comic Con, and made it one big thing, it's just too big for the Javits Center, and they are starting to do programming and Madison Square Garden and at the Hammerstein Auditorium.
Right.
And it, that all makes sense, but it also, logistically, it's kind of tough running around. They're redesigning the North Wing and doing construction work on it, so they're putting, I believe, Artist Alley in the basement. I'll know more when I'm there. But I love New York. I love the energy of New York. I love that everyone is there, especially the old guard living near New York as they needed to when they were working day to day for Marvel or DC. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know. It's still a tough con. And also, I'll be interested after having been gone as long as you have, what you think of the changes that have happened, because it's a much more crowded field, and certainly you're aware, obviously, because of what you cover, how TV and movies have really kind of, and even gaming, have dominated, the conventions, and they aren't as much about comics as they used to be. They're still about comics, just not as much. And it's, they have to share the spotlight with these other platforms and variations on, the intellectual properties and stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting still.
It is.
There you go.
Definitely.
Well, my friend, I
crazy. I thought of 3 more things I could say, but I'm done.
No, we're good. We're good. Let's wrap up. Seriously, thanks. Great talking to you. I'm sorry that we don't live down the street from each other. It's really great hearing your points of view again. And let's not let years go by before we do another one.
No, I'm all in. All in. Give me a call anytime.
Vaneta Rogers. Continue to read her stuff in Newsarama. Nobody covers her beat better. And I'm really glad that we were able to connect. It's been far too long, and I'm really happy that she was back on the show. And like I said, let's hope that our next conversation is sooner than later. And certainly won't let years go by before our next conversation with Vaneta. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. It was brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your support. If you'd like to subscribe to Word Balloon via Patreon, help the cause, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or click on the Patreon ad that's on the front page of wordballoon.com. Thank you very much, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by InStock Trades at InStockTrades.com. Great books at great prices. Books like Low from Rick Remender and Greg Tocchini. This collection that they've got right now, this is the Deluxe Hardcover Volume 1. Amazing stuff. This collects the first 15 issues of Low. It's 50% off, $24.99. And Rick and Company always take special care and make those hardcovers really great purchases. You can also get from Marvel, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and Yona Harvey and Butch Geiss and Mark Chater, the creative team behind Black Panther and the Crew. This collects the first 6 issues of that series. Let's see, it's called We Are the Streets. 45% off, it's $9.89. Haven't given Valiant love in a while. How about Jeff Lemire's run on Bloodshot? Bloodshot Reborn, the deluxe edition hardcover, Volume 2, features also great work from Doug Brathwaite and Miko Suyan. I'm sorry if I'm saying her name right or his name wrong. Kano is in there, of course. Renato Guides and Tomas Giorello. So again, Miko, I apologize if it's I don't know your gender. My apologies. But wonderful work on Bloodshot. I haven't met him or her, but it's a great run. And if you feel like correcting me, by all means, do it. I really like what Lemire has done with Bloodshot. And it's really converted me into a bit of a Valiant reader, something I've never been really in the, even in the old Valiant years. So it's neat to, experience these characters, and I think it's a tremendous run. This Volume 2 is 30% off. It's $34.99. Some of the great books that are available at InStockTrades.com. Check it out for yourself. Great books, great prices. Don't forget, if your orders are $50 or more, you'll receive free shipping from InStockTrades.com. Thanks again for listening to Word Balloon. We've got a new episode coming up in just a couple days. And to keep listening, because great guests are on their way, are penciled in. And I always like to say, I don't like to guarantee somebody's going to be on until the interview actually happens. But great Comics Histories interviews coming up in the days and weeks ahead. And some old favorites are coming back as well. So stick with us for the rest of October and beyond here at Word Balloon. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2017.